This is a presentation of Smacking Off the Podcast. The voice of Carl Brutananadilevsky is generated at 15.ai.
Welcome, football fans, to another quality edition of Devine's Games of the Week.
This Saturday will be 15 October, gents, a.k.a. Week 7. We are in the middle, the heart of the college football season. Can you believe we've got this? Like, the season is flying by.
Yep.
Yeah, it definitely is.
It feels like yesterday was Week 1, and I was yelling that Notre Dame couldn't get any offense against Ohio State.
It feels like barely yesterday when I was like, Jesus, I wish football season would start.
Right. And we're rapidly rolling through this season at a breakneck pace. Yeah, so let me talk about games that fell out real quick that we thought would be games that are no longer considered matchups this week. Two teams with high expectations before the season that now are both sub 500. This used to be a game. I know you know this, Kyle, and as well as Doug. The Miami Hurricanes are in Blacksburg this week for Virginia Tech. Thought that might be a game, but now it really doesn't matter.
And look at what Izzy Abanaconda did against the Hokies at Pittsburgh. Broke Tony Dorsett's rushing record. I think had 5 or 6 touchdowns last week against the Hokies. I mean, Brent Pry, I think, is going to turn around Virginia Tech. It's just Justin Fuente left that cupboard pretty bare. I mean, Dax Hollifield is a fantastic, and he's going to be a good pro in my mind. But that program is, I think that's going to be a tough rebuild. And if they can be patient with Pry, someone who both Bud Foster and Frank Beamer have kind of rallied behind, that might pay off for them in the long run, but he got a long rebuild ahead of him.
Absolutely. Another one, without going too much into depth with it, because we've kind of mentioned them both a little bit here. 3-3 Wisconsin visits 2-4 Michigan State.
Ooh.
Thought that was going to be a great Big Ten battle that would mean something in the Big Ten. I mean, it sort of does a little for Wisconsin, but I mean, not really in the grand scheme of things.
And here's another thing, and this is another reason, and I'm not trying to beleaguer the point about Oklahoma, but Michigan State benefited last year from KW3 out of the backfield being that dynamic playmaker, and Peyton Thorne was able to find, and they have a really good set of wide receivers. I know Sean Vergoven would agree with me, but the things that's crippled them were the things that they were able to mask because they've had these dynamic playmakers. I mean, their defense was atrocious last year. They just gave everything up. And it's the same thing this year. Outside, when they started playing Power 5 schools, they had no dominance on either side of the line.
I think if I read this stat correctly, Michigan State's defense this year against just the Power 5s they've played has given up in all those games, each one of them, over 500 yards of total offense to the opponent. That is not the Spartan defense we've, prior to Tuck being, with D'Antonio would usually have a very competent defense that would not give up 500 yards of total offense. You'd be lucky to get 300 yards and maybe 17 points. But Washington rolled them. Obviously, Ohio State rolled them last week, and there's a third one. Minnesota rolled them at home. I mean, and really the problem is you've committed $95 million to Tucker. Yikes. He better have a solution, and he better find one quick, because the Spartan fan base is getting very, very high strung at this point. Not so much for the losses. They've seen losses in the past. It's the way they're losing. They're getting absolutely embarrassed. And so I would say that, Doug likes to do the hot seat. I'm not going to give him the full Scott Frost treatment. Don't get me wrong. They're going to give him.
He's solid 3 alarm right
but
now.
he's 3 alarm right now, certainly. And if it gets worse, which it will, they got Michigan, I think Penn State still to go on the schedule. It could be a real problem in the offseason in East Lansing. And so, preseason, I had written that game down. I thought that was going to be something that mattered. And right now, frankly, it doesn't. Moving on to another game that we kind of earmarked preseason that no longer matters. The 3-3 Arkansas Razorbacks are visiting the 4-2 BYU Cougars. I think we all had kind of circled this game because both teams had played a little bit above their shoulders last season, and now both have kind of come back to earth. I still think this game is going to be watchable. I'm excited to see it, but it no longer has the sort of impetus that it had preseason.
I think Arkansas dropping the games they have, I think hurts. When you look at the Cougars of BYU, they've had a few wide receiver injuries. And the other thing is, if you said they're 4-2, so they lost to Notre Dame and they lost to Oregon. They have that good Baylor win. I think BYU's playing above where they should be because they also had Baylor on the schedule.
Yeah, but if they lose this week to Arkansas, you can basically stick a fork in BYU because
they're out of they need to win. They need to go 10-2 to be able to in my mind
to sniff a New Year's Six, maybe. Yes.
I think for them to get to the Holiday Bowl is where I think they're going to end up, or some or the equivalence of.
You're right. I get
when you and I growing up. You see
the Holiday Bowl is back this year. I'm gonna have to check, but I think it's finally back now that the San Diego State's new stadium is finally up and operational. And we're kind of past COVID per se. But I think that the Holiday Bowl has returned this year. Now I'll have to check my notes on that. But those were my 3 games that were in originally because I do this before the season starts, just looking straight at the schedule. And then as we go forward, I add games and I subtract games. These were the games I subtracted for week 7.
You've got to do this because you go through these games and figure out which ones you're going to.
Well, it's just like as a lot of the members in group, obviously the Smacking Off group and also Frenzy and some of the other groups we're in, this is sort of like the argument of why preseason polls don't really matter. For example, Notre Dame was number 5. I could have told I'm the biggest Notre Dame fan in the world. I could have told you we did not deserve to be number 5 in the last preseason poll the AP put out. But there's a number of other teams that were highly ranked in that, and now they're either not ranked, just as Notre Dame is, or other teams. So it's similar in that fashion or that vein. In that, some games you look at preseason on paper, but everyone's unbeaten. You go, I think that might be a good game. And then now here we are in week 7. Teams got 3 losses, 2 losses, 4 losses, and it ultimately doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. And then Kyle mentions a game that I had to add this week, and it's my honorable mention. I think Kyle probably has it in his top 5. So an honorable mention, had these teams been unbeaten coming into this game, which they both should be. My first honorable mention, 4-1 Minnesota visits the 5-1 Illinois Fighting Illini. And hey, kudos to Brett Bielema in Illinois for coming out of the witness protection program of college football. We haven't seen Illinois be halfway relevant, halfway with a pulse since, and Kyle knows the Big Ten better than I do, but I want to say like 2013, 2012. Is that right?
Do I have this correct? Has Bielema won 3 Big Ten titles?
He was in. He has.
Yes, Wisconsin.
Because they were good. Remember the 2012 one, Penn State and Ohio State, both who beat Wisconsin, were ineligible for the Big Ten championship game.
Correct. Yep. That was the Luke Fickell Buckeyes and the Bill O'Brien.
2012 was the undefeated Urban Meyer first year.
No. Urban wasn't there in 2012.
Yes, he was.
No.
Yeah,
I don't believe that's correct.
that is.
No, I'm going to fact check you on that. I don't.
He was.
Yeah, he was there.
Was he there? He was.
Yep.
I thought
He
that
was
was the
there,
interim
but-
coach in 2012 where they went unbeaten.
Because Penn State beat Ohio State in 2011 at the Shoe. I was at that game, and that was.
You know why I know he was
that
there?
was the last season.
How
Ohio
do you know
State.
Urban was that? You sure that wasn't Luke Fickle?
I'm 100% on this.
Wow.
Luke Fickell was the interim coach in 2011.
I remember that.
Okay, they went 6-7.
Yep. No, 7-6. I thought.
No, 6-7 was their last losing six. They lost.
Wow. Wow.
But Urban Meyer took over in 2012.
But yeah, I'm excited for this game. It just missed. If one of the two were unbeaten, I'd have it. And really, Illinois should be unbeaten. The loss to Indiana now looks very embarrassing. They kind of lost a little bit of focus in that game. I know it's a rivalry game. It really bleeds over more into the basketball season between the two programs, which are more basketball schools. But Illinois should be sitting at 6-0 for this game. And Minnesota as well. They sort of gave that game away at home against Purdue. And that's not to take anything away from Purdue. They have a dynamic passing attack. But that's really all they have. They cannot run the ball. And really, they only throw the ball to that one receiver that the quarterback loves there. I would have been double covering that receiver and daring them to run. Because Purdue doesn't want to run the football. They want to throw the ball around a yard. And also, that was at the Gopher Hole up there in the Twin Cities, and it was rocking. And PJ Fleck and the Gophers have no one to blame. They're going to look back at that game at the end of the year and regret losing to Purdue. They really are. So both teams should be unbeaten coming into this matchup. They're not, so it's sort of, it's like teams that are, either 5 or 6 in the final college football playoff. It just missed for me. What do you think, Kyle?
Which one
simply because, and I say that simply because, and I'm sorry to quickly interrupt you, but simply because there are much bigger matchups on there in this week. I mean, this week it's huge.
To me, that game, I would have it just on the outside as well. That's a game that has what I call indie ramifications, which is nice. But let's be honest. No one in the West is getting past Ohio State. So it's almost like.
Well, I'll stop you right there. Even though I do agree with you. I think Ohio State comes out of the East. But if they don't, say Michigan does or Penn State does, I don't think either program can beat any of those three programs at a neutral field in Indianapolis. But and then my last honorable mention for the weekend, and I know a lot of our listeners, they don't care about football on the West Coast, but I think it's going to be a good one here. The Washington State Cougars are 4-2, and they're visiting the 4-2 Oregon State Beavers in Corvallis. I think that's going to be a great game. It's going to be a fun game. Go ahead, Kyle.
That's a great game. I mean, is it in? You said Corvallis, right?
It's in Corvallis. Yes.
That Oregon State just impresses me. That program. I don't know what other superlatives I can throw out there, but they're always competitive. They're a grindy program. This is gonna be one of those games because there's a legitimate fight in the Pac-12 for middle tier power for who's going to get that better bowl game, because you figure USC's has playoff implications. You figure Oregon and UCLA are fighting for that number 2 spot. Washington and Utah are kind of in a league there, but then you have this group, that's Oregon State and Washington State. That, hey, who's going to get that half decent bowl game out of this, and who's going to get the lower tier bowl game? I think they would be fighting over the Vegas Bowl. I don't know the Pac-12 bowl structure fully at this point of the season, but that's one of those, hey, who gets the tier 2 bowl versus the tier 3 bowl game? Like when people are coming up with the matchups at the end, this game's going to have major implications for that.
Yeah, that sounds like you've already penciled in USC as your Pac-12 champion.
We could talk about that.
Yeah. But no, I just think just simply as a football game, I don't know where either team is going, but they've shown enough thus far this year. One, I don't think any of us saw Washington State, coming out of the blue and doing what they've done thus far. I mean, really, they were, a stone's throw away from beating Oregon there in Pullman. And Oregon State's been this grindy, tough team to beat. They lost a squeaker to USC there in Corvallis. But Jonathan Smith, he's an alum. He was a quarterback there. Now he's their head coach. He's got them playing tough. If either one of them had no losses or either of them had one loss, this might have cracked the top 5. But I still think it's a game that should be watched. If you have time, an extra monitor, whatever, throw on Washington State, Oregon State. It's going to be crazy. And even though the stadiums aren't quite as big as the Big Ten or the SEC, the fans travel. They're excited for this one out here on the West Coast. I know it's not the Pac-12 game of the week. Don't get me wrong, but it's something to keep an eye on. It's going to be a fun one in Corvallis. It's always a good time in Corvallis. I've been there. Beaver fans are, they're a small contingent, but they're a loud and rowdy contingent, and they're excited. And a win for either program. Excuse me, I went down the wrong pipe. A win for either program propels them into the end of the season, and both still have their primary rivalry games ahead. Washington State has UW in the Apple Cup, and then, of course, the Civil War, or I guess we're not supposed to call it Civil War. I know. I'm sorry. Force of habit. I apologize.
I'm just going to go on record. I still call it the Civil War.
Yeah, I apologize, but old habits are tough to break. And
I'm fine with it.
But Oregon State will be lit, if Oregon State wins this game. And as Kyle alluded to, I don't quite know the Pac-12 bowl structure, but this also has bearing on where, you're going for the bowl game. Is it going to be a nice warm destination, or maybe you end up at the famous Boise, Idaho Potato Bowl in Boise, in December, which is not somewhere you really want to be for your bowl destination. No disrespect. I think Boise's a great town. Just not quite in December is not really where I want to go to Boise. June, July, great, absolutely great. But I'm excited for this one. This one gets my last honorable mention of the week, Doug.
And I would just to say, if you're going to watch this Oregon State Washington State game, you got to check out Cameron Ward. He is a stud. He I believe was a FCS transfer from Incarnate Ward down in Texas. He had nearly 5,000 yards and 48 touchdowns last year.
San Antonio, Kyle. I've been to Incarnate Word. Yeah, tiny little campus, but it's a lovely, lovely university.
Yep. He's now at Washington State. He's completed nearly 70% of his passes, has 15 touchdowns on the season. He's one of those guys that he's in the top 10, I think, both in yards and touchdowns. But again, he does have an interception problem, but he's a guy that, you want to keep an eye on from afar. If you're going to tune into this game, he could be the difference maker for the Cougars.
Kyle, they told us the transfer portal was bad, and look what it's done for Oregon State and Washington State. I mean, we're talking about two programs that were moribund for a few years. Oregon State kind of got their stuff together last year. But the transfer portal is showing that some of these programs that used to be Illinois, we mentioned them earlier, moribund, are having a little success in finding guys, even at the FCS level, that can be beneficial to their program and make them a lot more competitive. Are they going to go to a New Year's Six? Probably not, but a better bowl than what they've been accustomed to? Certainly.
I'm gonna throw in the typical West Coast bowls, but it may be the difference between like the Foster Farms Bowl or the Cheez-It Bowl. I think that's the one in San Francisco.
No, the Cheez-It's in Florida now.
The Cheez-It. What's the bowl
Our
game?
good friend Dane Kelly will tell you about that because his Clemson Tigers were Cheez-It Bowl champions last year.
What's the bowl game in San Francisco? Is it that used to be the Foster Farms Bowl? That's in.
Yeah, it's still there, but it's not called the Foster Farms anymore. I think it's sponsored by the Emerald, the pistachio company, the company that makes the pistachio.
But again, and this is what I try to tell folks, and this is what these games here that that might be under the radar that we're saying, hey, that are good. These games are the difference between programs going to the Emerald Bowl or the Nut Bowl in San Francisco, the Idaho, the Blue Turf Bowl, the Vegas Bowl in Las Vegas, or the Holiday Bowl down in San Diego. I mean, these are some big games.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. That's why. If you got an extra monitor, in your wherever you watch your games, or if you're at B-Dubs, you tell the server to maybe throw this one on the TV in the corner. But this is going to be a fun one in Corvallis between these two programs.
It's like right when Pac-12 After Dark is kicking off. I think is it 9 or 10 o'clock?
I think it's a later kick. Yeah, so it could be a Pac-12.
No, this is one of those like, hey, if you're tired of the primetime game and you want to watch some exciting football and like a really good evenly matched, find the Washington State Oregon State game. You won't be disappointed.
Have a happy Halloween. This is Dr. Balls, and you're listening to Smacking Off, the podcast.
Support Smacking Off the podcast by patronizing our affiliates' products. Go to our website at smackology.42web.io and click the affiliates link. There you will find a host of great deals to stretch your dollar to its fullest.
Great products like Showtime, Shark Vacuums, Dish Network, VidGo, Hulu, NFL Plus, and GameStop. The list goes on. Remember, smackology.42web.io and remember to click the affiliates link for these products and many more.
NC State at Syracuse, 3:30 Eastern kick on the ACC network.
So number 5, not on paper, you would think before the season started, I had to add this one, but it has huge implications. The 5-1 NC State Wolfpack, their only defeat coming at Clemson, travels to are you ready for this? The unbeaten 5-0 Syracuse Orange up at whatever they're calling the Carrier Dome now. I'm still calling it the Carrier Dome. It will always be the Carrier Dome. But
it's that dome without air conditioning.
No, they finally got air conditioning just recently from whoever is now the sponsor. I don't know who it is, but
we'll call it the dome that formerly had no air conditioning.
Before you dig too deep, Sean, into this one, let's at least assure our listeners that the Syracuse game will be a full 60-minute game, because if those who follow the Orange recall, their last opponent was against Wagner, and after halftime, they basically played like a high school rules of 10-minute quarters and a running clock.
Yes, correct. But so forget the Wagner game. The game that I recall most so far this season is the shootout they had with Purdue, which they should have lost, but guess what? They didn't. They didn't lose that game. Came close to. They tried to, but they didn't. And so Syracuse, this can really make or break them in the ACC as they drive towards maybe a berth in the ACC championship game. What better way to do that than, you catch NC State sleeping up there in the Carrier Dome. We've seen it before. Other teams come up there. Oh, it's just Syracuse. It's just the Carrier Dome. They're going to be rocking. They'll be ready to go. Dino Babers has this team playing well above the way they've played in recent years for his teams. Syracuse, not a pushover this year. They have been in recent past. And I think Dino's trying to save his job.
He needs to get to a bowl to save his job.
Which he will. He will get to the bowl.
Well, and I think it's going to be tough sledding for him to get to a bowl. When you look at their schedule, Syracuse over the next this is their next 6 opponents. Okay, might as well just say the rest of their schedule at this point. They have NC State at the Dome. They then travel to Clemson. Then they have Notre Dame, Pitt. They got to go to Acrisure Stadium.
Oh, it's the big ketchup. It's always going to be Heinz Field. Come on now.
Then they have Florida State at home, and then they got Sam Hartman-led Wake Forest Demon Deacons. If this NC State game is huge for them, I don't see Syracuse be. They would, in my mind, have to beat Clemson next week to be in an ACC title game host, but you can't have those without beating NC State this week. Sean Tucker is an amazing back, and I think he's starting to get sledding. It was a shame. I think during the ACC media days, no one showed up for the Oranges presentation.
I remember that. And literally there was, I think, Dino Babers, one of his players, and then the camera guy and one reporter, and that was, I believe, the guy that covers Syracuse regularly, locally.
So
the rest of those tables were all empty.
Oh, yeah. And I think NC State could, I don't know if they're still having the Clemson hangover from a few weeks back, but this is one of those games where, I'm trying to remember his name, the quarterback, Devin Leary, I think it is.
I believe that's correct.
He hasn't had that sort of jump that people were banking on. But the Wolfpack defense is still top notch. I think this is going to be a slugfest in the Dome. I like the Wolfpack, but this is one of those games, again, I'm not surprised if Syracuse wins. But I do think if they're going to try to get bowl eligibility,
it has to be this week.
You hate to say it, but, the way that schedule stacks up,
it's ugly. Oh, it's definitely ugly. Yeah, I mean,
Boston College is a team who I thought that could go to a bowl game has looked atrocious. So that would be their 6th win in my mind. But I really don't like them against Wolf. This is their 50-50 game. I don't like them at Clemson. Even though Notre Dame's down, I think they've kind of found themselves. I think that's a win. If Pitt's healthy, if Izzy Abanaconda's healthy, Pitt wins that game at home. Florida State's another one where they could possibly win at. I think this is one of those games where Syracuse needs to get. I mean, if they get, say, this one and somehow splits the Pitt Florida State round there and beats Boston College, it's an 8-win season. That's a great year for Babers.
I agree. I completely. And I don't know if you looked at the line yet on this game, but you ready for this?
I'm ready.
Syracuse 3.5-point favorite going into this game in the Dome.
Interesting.
Yeah, they like.
I like your. I think they have Oronde Gadsden is one of their top receivers. He's a guy who stretches the field a lot. Syracuse got some weapons. This is one of those games where, if for Syracuse, in my mind, to win, their offense has to, move the ball and score points in this game. So,
and if NC State loses, I mean, expectations were huge preseason for NC.
Oh my God, yes.
So to me, the pressure is all on NC State. More so than Syracuse. I know Syracuse is unbeaten, but they're playing with house money right now. I don't think they thought they'd be unbeaten at this point in the season. So that's my number 5 game of the week. I think I'm excited for it. I know it's in the Carrier Dome, which is not the greatest place to watch a game. The lighting isn't great there. It's been around, I think, since 1981 or 82, something like that. But This is going to be a great game. I'm excited. I think it's going to go down to the wire, as most of these kind of ACC games do as of late. And so, throw it on your television. Let's give it a look. Let's see if if Syracuse is for real or not. I mean, I'm kind of starting to believe in them, and I think Babers is a great coach. I think he's in a bad spot per se. I think he'd be better off potentially taking another job somewhere else. But let's see what we got. Let's find out. And I think NC State, they righted the devastating loss in the Textile Bowl to Clemson last week by squeaking out the win against Florida State. That was not the best NC State I've seen, and Florida State certainly played their tails off on the road in Raleigh. But this is going to be a challenge now for NC State coming off that squeaker win at home, having to go up, to Northwest New York, where we've seen teams fall. We've even seen Clemson lose up there. So I hope NC State isn't taking this game lightly. And that's my number 5 game of the week.
USC at Utah 8 Eastern kick on Fox.
Number 4, going out to the Pac-12 again, the unbeaten men of Troy, 6-0 with Lincoln Riley, visit the Great Salt Lake and the 4-2 Utah Utes. The Trojans going into this game, Doug, 3.5-point underdogs. And Utah has looked good over the last 2 weeks. And Utah, right, as of late, has had USC's number. And can USC, who's squeaked out a few wins to stay perfect, can they continue that? Kyle, what do you think?
So, and again, I'm throwing another shameless plug to this week's maintenance report that I have up.
You're going to have to pay Doug royalties.
I think so too. I think he should get some money from Farrell for some clicks that he may get from this. One of my issues that I point out is Caleb Williams in big games plays poorly. So last season in Oklahoma, he hit a wall against Baylor, Iowa State, and Oklahoma State. In 3 games, he threw for a combined 481 yards, completed less than 50% of his passes, and had 3 touchdowns and 3 picks. Oklahoma lost 2 of the 3. Now, goes to USC, you figure he has like every advantage to him. He has Travis Dye at running back. He has NFL receivers galore around him.
He has the reigning Biletnikoff winner there in Jordan Addison.
Yeah, he has Voorhees, who Pro Football Focus, like it's between Voorhees and Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern that love the most. So you figure, he got the weapons. But in 2 games this year where the Trojans have been tested, Williams has struggled. I mean, against Oregon State, he completed only 44% of his passes and threw for less than 200 yards and had a touchdown. And then Washington State last week, even though the Trojans won 30-14, Caleb Williams only completed just above 50% of his passes and had less than 200 yards, but had 2 touchdowns. If USC wants to get into this playoff conversation, and I get, every week, even the best players don't play, like a high level, but Caleb Williams, this is a trend, a troubling trend that's gone on with him. I mean, it would bode well for him if they can go to Utah and he completes like at least 60% of his passes, has like 300 yards and a few touchdowns. And again, that's a big thing with me with this game is what does Caleb Williams do? Because Utah, in my mind, is talented on both sides. I love on the Utah defense. I'm a huge Junior Tafuna fan. I think he's taken over for Devin Lloyd, who's now in the NFL as the
great
defensive
for
leader. Yeah. So, it sucks that Utah, who played a great Rose Bowl, who had all this playoff aspirations, kind of seen them go up in smoke this season. But you know what? They're playing for that. Hey, can I get to that tier 2? Maybe even squeak into a tier 1 bowl game. So. This is a type of game that could give them their resume bling here. So
I'm excited most importantly with the coaching matchup here. Lincoln Riley against Kyle Whittingham. I think this is a chess match between those two, and I'm really...
See what Whittingham said of Riley?
I did not. No, I did not see his comments.
Whittingham said that, this is a great team that money could buy. So that's bulletin board material.
Wow. That is usually Kyle Whittingham is much more reserved with his comments. I'm surprised.
Yeah, he said this in the Salt Lake City papers. It was a roundabout to the thing there. I'm going to try to pull it up real quick here. But that's bulletin board material in my mind.
Oh, I completely agree. Now,
it was a shot about the trans. His words were, "Pay them a bunch of money. Do you have money we can use to pay them?" That kind of comes down to I'm not accustomed to illegal improprieties or anything like that because it's above board now with NIL. But I said before, there's going to come a time in the very, very near future where the top 25 NLL pots of money are going to mirror exactly the top 25 teams in the country. So, he takes a shot, but he has a good point there with it because that's, I think, where we're eventually headed to with college football.
Yeah, it's a roundabout way at taking a shot, certainly. But he caveats that by saying, it's not illegal. NIL is a reality, and unfortunately, there's going to be haves and have-nots. Clearly, USC is a have, and Utah, unfortunately, is a little bit of a have-not. Now, that doesn't mean that they haven't always been a have-not because they've built that program from the ground up. Kyle Whittingham has, and they find guys. They develop guys. So, I think this game is going to be won at the line of scrimmage, as most games are. And as you alluded to, Williams hasn't played great in some of the USC close wins. Can he do it in a very hostile, Salt Lake City crowd? And they're going to be there, and they're going to be loud, and they're going to be rocking. I'm interested.
And USC are the underdogs here.
Yeah, I think this is their first game they've been an underdog.
It is. Yep.
Kyle, any other thoughts on that one?
No.
Fuck those Utes, right?
I don't know. Kyle, do you not care?
No, I actually like Kyle Whittingham, and I like his program. Even though when it comes to the holy war between BYU and Utah, I always pull for the Y. I have great respect for Utah. Like I said, I'm a huge Tafuna fan, and I can't wait to see what he does. It is great. He was Pac-12 Freshman Defensive Player of the Year last year, so he's a guy that I'm really excited to see develop. I just think it's going to come down to Cam Rising. Can he make enough plays or at least counterpunch what Caleb Williams may or may not be able to do? So,
yeah, I would not be surprised to see Utah win this game.
I'm not either. This is, again, another one of those games where, if you tell me Utah's going to win, I'm not surprised, and then I'm not surprised if USC wins another squeaker.
I completely agree with you. If USC does win this game, I think they squeak by, But if they don't, man, this really throws the Pac-12 into sort of a little bit of craziness, which, as you know, I'm all for. I'm all for the 2007 craziness. Give me some more craziness here in 2022.
Are you behind the times when it comes to cutting the cord? Well, stay tuned. This next message is just for you.
The NFL season is here, and you can watch all the action on CBS, ESPN, Fox, NBC and NFL Network live on Hulu Plus Live TV. Get access to over 75 live channels plus Hulu's entire streaming library now with access to Disney Plus and ESPN Plus. Go to smackology.42web.io and follow the affiliates link. Then find the Hulu link.
Oklahoma State at TCU 3:30 Eastern kick on ABC.
Game 3, we have an unbeaten matchup here, and we go back to the Big 12. The Mike Gundy, I'm a man, I'm 40, well now he's 55 or whatever he is. Unbeaten Oklahoma State Cowboys, 5-0, roll into Fort Worth, Texas, where I was just at, to visit the unbeaten TCU Horned Frogs, 5-0. Sonny Dykes' his Horned Frogs are rolling.
Is Mike Gundy still a man having a mullet at age 55?
I think so. I think in Oklahoma you're allowed. I think that's.
Does he still have the mullet? I thought that he did
it's
away
like
with
a
the
baby
mullet.
mullet.
Okay.
Do you think back in the day Mike Gundy was a Billy Ray Cyrus fan?
He might have wanted to be at one point in time, and now he's okay with being Mike Gundy, head coach of the Cowboys.
Just don't call his backup quarterback fat or anything like that.
Right. Yeah, don't do that. Don't do that. He defends his players, if anything else. We know that about Mike Gundy. Oklahoma State's look good. Not great, but they're unbeaten. TCU has looked great at times, and at other times not great, but they're also unbeaten. So something's got to give down in Fort Worth this weekend. The people clad in purple are going to be out in force at Amon G. Carter Stadium, rooting on the Horned Frogs to keep the unbeaten season going. Duggan has looked great for TCU, which is shocking because I didn't see him playing this well this year. Oklahoma State comes in as a 3.5-point underdog. However, the over-under is 68, so they're expecting a very high-scoring game between these two down in Fort Worth.
Well, when you look at the Horned Frogs, everything begins and ends with Quentin Johnston, who might be the best wide receiver in the country.
He's incredible.
He might, he may not win the Biletnikoff because, that they try to give it to the glamour schools.
Right.
But if you're talking about who's probably going to be the first wide receiver picked in the NFL draft next spring,
he's right there.
He's the guy.
Yeah.
He's the freak of nature. What's crazy going into this game, and for folks that are at home here with us, this is going to be a game where you're going to see both teams average exactly 46.4 points a game.
Which is insane.
Both teams average nearly TCU's over 500 yards of total offense. Oklahoma State's just a tad under, but to Oklahoma State's credit, they had to play Baylor, which they are one of the few teams in that conference that actually plays defense. So, TCU's defense isn't exactly worth writing home about either, but this is one of those games where, look, Oklahoma State's one of two teams in the country. It's them and Ohio State that have won each of their games so far by double digits.
Yep.
So, it looks like
because every time I turn on Oklahoma State, like at the beginning of a game, it looks like they're struggling, and then when I flip back later in the game, they're handling their business. They're not a fast starting team, which is where I think TCU might have the advantage in this game. TCU does start very quickly.
If I'm not mistaken, Derek Mason is their new defensive coordinator. Obviously, Knowles is at Ohio State.
Correct.
Yeah, the other OSU is country. He's done. I don't think he's done as good of a job as Knowles did. But also, Oklahoma State lost a lot to the NFL.
I was just going to say, there's been a lot of losses on that defense now. So let's.
I know, Sean, you partake in watching Hard Knocks, so Malcolm Rodrigo is really missed in Stillwater this year. So
absolutely, he is. But he's loving life. He's loving life in the NFL.
I do want to buy one of his jerseys, which is crazy in itself. My take on this game here is I think Oklahoma State is on sort of a revenge tour. And when you look at their schedule, you know, they got Texas next week. They got Kansas State, Kansas, who looks good. They got a brutal schedule. So if they're going to trip a game up, it's going to be this week.
I agree. And this is, I don't know the stats quite like you do. I'm not, as Doug and I always joke about during this show, if you've, listened to it for a minute, I've never called myself an analyst. I've never called myself a statistician. I'm not Sal Palantonio on NFL Matchup, for example, who I love, by the way. That's my new favorite follow is, I love him in that matchup show. They're in 12 personnel. They're in the gun. I don't know anything about that. But what I do know is college football, not only in a game, but even during a season, is a game of momentum and a game of belief. And right now, if it was a stock, I'm buying it. I'm buying everything that Sonny Dykes is selling. I love what Sonny Dykes is doing there. And you know what's crazy? You're coming off of Gary Patterson's tenure. No slouch at TCU. What Gary Patterson did at TCU, absolutely incredible. He took this program from a group of 5 program and built them into got them into a conference where they are Power 5.
I mean, but think about it. He took them from what, Conference USA to the Mountain West
to the Big 12, yeah. Right? And so I'm not trying to disparage Gary Patterson, who, by the way, is, I believe, an analyst for Texas now, and boy, did he do a good job with their defense last week, winning their biggest rivalry game by the biggest margin since 1965, when Lyndon Johnson was in the White House. But
another Texan. But
what Sonny Dykes is doing there is building belief. And I hope he can hang around TCU TCU is one of the programs that has, a soft spot in my heart. It's a smaller program. It's a great school to go to. It's a tough school to get into. Obviously we saw what he did at SMU. So Rhett Lashley there has big shoes to fill, but and my bias is coming into play here. I didn't like the fact that, Okie State came back and beat my Irish in the Fiesta Bowl last year. So I'm biased. I admit to the listeners, I am a biased source. So don't take my thoughts as your gambling advice. Never do that. And in fact, I would suggest not gambling, even though certainly I like to put a few shekels on these games myself. But, TCU at home at Amon G. Carter is a different animal than when they go on the road. And and Max Duggan has been slinging the pill. And like you said, they probably have the number 1 wide receiver in the draft. And right now, as good as Mason has that Oklahoma State defense playing, I don't think Oklahoma State has anybody that can match up with him on the edge. Sorry about my dog. Stop that. But I like Max Duggan to find a way to win this game down in Fort Worth. The number's probably true. I like a last-second touchdown by TCU to win this by 3. I do. And it'll be high scoring. I think it'll be 47-44 TCU in a high-scoring affair down there in Fort Worth.
I'm going to go the opposite way. I'm going to take Mike Gundy. I'm taking the Oklahoma State Cowboys. I just feel they're on a revenge tour, and
we saw the last time that revenge tour name was bandied about with Michigan, and that at some point the revenge tour has to stop.
Yeah,
I think this is a trap game for them because I think they're going to have their eyes on a revitalized, rejuvenated Texas team that now has Ewers back. Texas without Ewers is a completely different team. We saw them lose to Tech out in Lubbock. I think they win that game if they have Ewers. They did not. Texas with Ewers is and maybe it's recency bias on my part because I was just there, but Ewers is only getting better.
Look at Ewers against Alabama before he got hurt.
I think Doug was very happy to see Ewers leave that game because he was slinging that pill. I mean, there's a reason he was a 5-star, top-notch, Elite 11 quarterback prospect, and he's got that arm. That arm is Quinn Ewers at Texas.
Never heard of him.
But that arm is live. That is a rubber band of an arm, and he can, having seen it in person. Now, what's between his ears sometimes malfunctions, but when he needs to make a throw with that right arm is golden. I mean, that arm can make every throw. I mean, he's got a cannon. I'll be frank, So I think Oklahoma State is eyeing that game with Texas the following week, and I think they trip up here against TCU.
I think they'll win by 10 this week. I don't think they're going to blow them out, but I think it's going to be one of those schools that
you want to bet a Primanti sandwich on that.
Sure.
Penn State at Michigan's noon Eastern kick on Fox.
Well, number 2 is a game that is near and dear to Kyle's heart. The unbeaten, and I am, Doug, I got something in my throat. I think I got a hairball or something in my throat. But the 5-0 Penn State Nittany Lions head to Ann Arbor this weekend to take on the 6-0 Michigan Wolverines.
This is going to be – there's a couple things at play here. Number one, the quarterback between both schools. Clifford and McCarthy are going to be big difference makers. McCarthy this season on play-action passes has a perfect quarterback rating. Sean Clifford in the red zone has the highest red zone completion percentage amongst all quarterbacks in college football. So there's factors there that are going to be huge.
I'm iffy on both quarterbacks, by the way.
I feel you.
I think McCarthy relies on his athleticism a little too much. And Clifford, albeit he's a sixth-year quarterback, still sometimes has a mental faux pas and makes throws he shouldn't have. Now, granted, I'm relying on the Purdue game because that was really the sole Penn State game I've watched of the year. But in that game, did he make some great throws? He certainly did. But he also made some throws where, I'm certainly not a Penn State fan, but I left going, well, why did he do that when he could have done this? Maybe I'm speaking out of turn. Penn State better than I do, but for a guy that's a 6-year senior, I would figure his decision-making skills would be much more advanced than what they are. And yet he still does things certainly during a game where I go, well, why did he do that? He had a check down here, or he had a secondary option there that he could have done, and instead he decided to do that.
I think mentally he's sharp, but I think his physical limitations is what we see when we watch him have these gaffes.
That was my other. Is it just me, or does he have somewhat of a weak arm?
He has a weak arm.
And when I say weak arm, he's got an arm for college football, but you and I are always looking for the guy that has the arm for NFL football.
Yeah, I don't even think he even has a USFL arm.
Okay. Now, do you think Penn State will rely in this game on the very talented running back, which I can't believe he didn't go to Notre Dame. Just kidding. The spectacular, is he a true freshman or a redshirt freshman?
True freshman. He was the number one running back out in the last recruiting cycle.
He was spectacular against Auburn.
Governor Mifflin, Nicholas Singleton.
Yeah, Singleton is he's a difference maker.
In my mind, I might be in a minority on this, but the kid that they got in the same recruiting class as Singleton from the IMG Academy, another Miami guy that they couldn't keep at home, but went to Penn State. Sean Allen.
That's another indictment. Imagine you grew up in Florida, beautiful weather, other than obviously the hurricane, and our thoughts go out to those affected by Hurricane Ian. But you grew up in Florida, perfect weather, damn near year round, right? And you chose to go to Pennsylvania for college. That's also an indictment. But go on. I'm sorry for interrupting.
But I'm more of a Katron Allen fan myself.
Really? I think Singleton is just special.
Singleton's special. There's no doubt. It's like I don't want USC fans coming after me being like, how dare you compare? But I'm just doing the analogy. Singleton's the Reggie Bush between the two, and
poor man Reggie Bush. Let's pump the brakes a little there. Reggie was I'm not saying that I'm just using it as an analogy, not saying that they're gonna be. I think I would put Singleton as he's more shifty than Saquon Barkley and has a little bit more speed. He doesn't quite have the power Saquon had.
Correct.
But I've yet to see – he doesn't quite have the hands out of the backfield that Barkley developed.
Or the ability to run routes receiving-wise as Barkley.
But he's a true freshman, so that might come. But what I've seen when he runs, particularly off tackle, once the O-line does their job, when he gets to that second level, he is dangerous. And I would say – he's on pace, and this is a big statement. I'm going to make a big statement. But if he continues to make the progress that I see him making, which is already as a true freshman, he might take over the mantle after this year of the best running back in college football, which right now is in Austin, Texas. I've seen Bijan Robinson. I know I was there live. Bijan Robinson is a special running back. He is incredible. And no disrespect to who I like really second, who I think is very special, is Gibbs down at Alabama. He has been doing spectacular.
State.
And also, Travion Henderson. He's no slouch. But I think if Singleton continues to make the progress he makes next year, he's going to be your preseason Doak Walker, potential winner. Because I love what Singleton does. I love he can run power and he can run speed. He is the all-purpose back
for this game.
So I think for Penn State to win this game, their offensive line has to create opportunities for Singleton, as well as who was the other gentleman you mentioned?
Beatron Allen.
You have to be able to run the ball on the road as Penn State to come out of there with a W. If you guys cannot run the ball up in Ann Arbor, you guys are not going to win. If it becomes Sean Clifford has to win this game solely on his arm, I don't think you guys win.
For me, Penn State, Michigan lost two really good defenders to the draft and, eligibility ran out in Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo.
Yep.
And through 6 games last year, they had 14 sacks. Through 6 games this year, they have 22. Now we could bring up the the level of competition.
Level of competition, certainly.
But you still, they're still have a ferocious pass rush that you have to respect.
That is a trademark of a Jim Harbaugh team. He loves that.
The other aspect for Penn State is, and I mentioned this in the preseason, and again, Manny Diaz, who former Miami coach, who's now our defensive coordinator, he fell in love with Abdul Carter, who's a true freshman linebacker who might, it's hard if there is a freshman player who's impacting this team as much as Singleton is. It is number 11, Abdul Carter, which that number 11 tradition of Penn State you can't. That's LeVar Arrington, Navarro Bowman,
probably the best defensive player in the NFL right now, Micah Parsons. And Doug is playing us off from this game. So we both have Michigan.
My last thing on this game is Franklin every game does something stupid, like a play call. He's aggressive when he shouldn't. He'll do something dumb here that puts his team behind the 8 ball. So I got the Wolverines winning this week.
Oh, I want to ask you another follow-up, but Doug has already played us off.
Go ahead.
If Joe Pa is the coach, do they win versus James Franklin?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought you'd say, yeah. I think so too. Yeah. Okay.
Does Jerry Sandusky coach the defense?
Yeah.
That's a lot of penetration going up in Ann Arbor.
Yeah. I see what you did there. That was well played.
Oh, hi. I'm Clinton Bain, and this is Smacking Off, the podcast.
Support Smacking Off the podcast by patronizing our affiliates' products. Go to our website at smackology.42web.io and click the affiliates link. There you will find a host of great deals to stretch your dollar to its fullest.
Great products like Showtime, Shark Vacuums, Dish Network, Vidgo, Hulu, NFL Plus, and GameStop. The list goes on. Remember, smackology.42web.io and remember to click the affiliates link for these products and many more.
Alabama at Tennessee, 3:30 Eastern kick on CBS.
Our number one game of the week this week is the third Saturday in October. And Doug, as long as we've been doing this program, this show, I don't think this game has ever come up but for this year.
It's the biggest one since the early 90s, probably.
I think that's about right.
But I was surprised to look back at the series and see that the last time it was a top 10 matchup was actually 2016, when Butch Jones was there in Tennessee was at 9, and I believe Alabama might have been 1.
That was the year Butch Jones had the couple miracle wins leading up to this game.
I was going to say that's a bit of a fugazi, and fugazi is something that's matter that hasn't landed. It's not real. We knew that Tennessee team was fugazi. It was
We
fake.
will never refer to the golden era of Bujo as fugazi. That was as golden of an era as Tennessee football.
Was it Bujo did Bujo win the battle at Bristol? Was that him?
Yeah, that was that. And you know what, Sean, you got to remember that 2016 Volunteers team won the biggest championship of them all.
It's the most important championship, Kyle.
And it's the one that our Lord and Savior gave us for Family Smack here. So,
well, you run that, so that's your baby. That's your baby.
If you know how Bill Curry is all about championing Bobby Dodd, no matter where he goes, he'll be like,
I'm aware.
He'll be like, Bobby Dodd's greatest coach ever. I am Butch Jones's Bill Curry here.
And hey, don't knock Bobby Dodd, by the way. I believe his Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets were 4-time SEC champions, if memory serves.
Yeah, I think they won a few times.
Yeah. I mean, and they were the 1952 national champions, which hashtag bring Georgia Tech back to the SEC as well as Tulane. Let's not forget that.
Well, let's also keep in mind that 52 national championship trophy is nowhere near as immaculate as the 2016 Battle of Bristol trophy.
Well, of course, if you play a game in front of 160,000 people,
you got to make a trophy big enough for the person in the last seat to see it.
You're darn right. You're darn right. But hopes are extraordinarily high on Rocky Top, ladies and gentlemen.
They are more excited than I've seen them in a long time. These falls.
And Doug can speak to this with the participation in both the Smacking Off group as well as some of his participation in other groups, along with our participation in other groups. I haven't seen this many Vols on the internet since before Donald Trump was president. And that was after they upset Georgia on the Hail Mary play.
Well, Windstream must have gotten their high-end fiber there throughout the rural areas of Tennessee.
I was going to say the Tennessee Valley Authority must have been putting in a lot of routers for internet, because the Vol fans are out and they are letting you know that they are on their way, not just to the championship of life, but I don't know if you guys have been noticing, but a lot of Vol fans are saying, if we get past Alabama this Saturday, we're headed to the college football playoff. Not my words, their words.
Justin Pike's going to lose his mind.
Now, Going into this game, let me paint the picture real quick for our listeners, who we love. Our listeners are the best. And also, they should go buy themselves some Smacking Off apparel. Doug will drop that link. But I already got one. It's great. People will ask you when you go to games, wear your Smacking Off the Podcast t-shirt. If you love college football, rep the Smacking Off the Podcast, because that's all we do is college football. It's life. But going into this game, Tennessee, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, has not won this game since 2005.
Yes, that's correct. No, 2006.
2006, excuse me. My apologies.
When Fat Phil was on the sideline.
Yeah, actually, Alabama actually won it in 5.
My apologies. 2006. So we're talking 10 plus 16 years since the Vol Nation has experienced the ability to smoke a cigar on the third Saturday in October.
They've never posted it on Facebook or MySpace.
Exactly. In fact, they were still renting videos at Blockbuster when they last won this game. And I could see Alabama winning this by 10, 13, even 14 points. Just simply, I'm not impressed with the Tennessee defense. I haven't been.
I think Tennessee's going to keep this game close. I think this is going to be one of those instant classic type games sorts of deals.
Oh, you're talking maybe Mount Cody has to block a field goal to win this game, kind of.
I'm talking like a 41-39 type game.
Wow. I just don't see that. I mean, I think we're all going to be watching on Saturday, but I don't see that. I see Alabama by 13. And I think the backbreaker, because Tennessee will be so focused on Bryce Young, is what we've seen Alabama do to break back so far this year, is Gibbs will hit a home run winning rushing touchdown, and Alabama marches on unbeaten, and Tennessee has their first loss of the year.
I think this is going to be like a game that I'm going to probably post-mortem Penn State, Michigan, and it's going to feel like this, what I've seen from Penn State against Ohio State or probably Michigan on Saturday, where there might be Penn State may have a lead late, Tennessee may have a lead late, but Alabama, being the champions they are, find the way to win the game.
And the difference comes down to as good as Josh Heupel has done, and I think he's only getting started in his coaching career. But I think this is where the old guard comes out, Nick Saban, the old lion, and just says, yeah, not yet. Not yet. We're not quite ready to give up the mantle. And Alabama continues to be unbeaten, and they march on, and their next big gate, I'm doing air quotes here, as Doug loves when I'm doing this program. The next big date is the LSU game, which, assuming Alabama stays healthy, I mean that. I don't know, Doug. Can you tell me, is that game in Baton Rouge or Tuscaloosa?
It's in Baton Rouge.
So it might not quite be the bloodbath we thought it might be in Tuscaloosa, but I think they're still going to handle LSU. And then obviously Auburn comes to Tuscaloosa this year, where, I mean, we might be talking about how soon after the game, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, is Brian Hart's to get fired. But I have Alabama getting to Atlanta unbeaten as the SEC West champion. The SEC West, unfortunately, a little bit down this year, but Alabama has mastered any test that has come their way, even with Jalen Milroe. And if Milroe could ever find his accuracy with his arm, I mean, that's a dangerous cat. And I would hope that they could work on his accuracy, because his athletic ability is through the roof. He gives me a little bit of a Michael Vick vibe to what he does athletically.
If I hit this end, it's going to end the call.
All right, Doug. Later, dude. Later, gents.
Here's 6 things that you can do to help support this podcast. Like, share and comment on our videos. Buy our merchandise. Use our affiliate web links to buy great products and services from our affiliates. And tell others about our podcast.